there's been arguments and there's been resentments and there's been times where you've probably said things you shouldn't have said, but it hasn't escalated into anything else. And I think we've saved our relationships across or for all those kids because of it.
From Mamma Mia, I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to No Filter, candid conversations that count. Mandy Nolan has 5 kids to 3 different dads. 2 of them she married, and 1 was her de facto partner for many years. This is a woman who knows a lot about blending a family, and then blending it again in a different way. The thing with blending, though, is that once you mix lives together, you can't unblend them. Once connected, the bonds Mandy and her 5 kids have with all of their fathers and father figures are there for life, in different ways. Mandy is the host of our new podcast about surviving separation and divorce. It's called The Split, and we sat down together to talk about how to have a good breakup. Well, the best kind of breakup you can have for you. This isn't just about conscious uncoupling, Gwyneth Paltrow style. And I wanted to know how Mandy juggles the relationships that she has with all her children's very different fathers. Mandy, tell me about Christmas last year.
Oh, it was one of those Christmases I've been really wanting to have, and that's what we call the 3D Christmas, when all the dads turn up. Now, not all the dads like the other dads at the same time, but I've managed to get the dads to tolerate each other. Some of the dads really like each other, and there's a bit of dad-tagonism. It's not that bad. So I want
5 children, 3 dads. How many of them were husbands?
Only 2 have been husbands.
Okay.
1 was de facto with children. So it actually ended up quite okay in the end. I staggered it. So we had breakfast with one dad, that's middle dad, and he had breakfast with my husband and the kids.
And your husband is not among the dads?
He's a dad, yeah.
He's one of the 3 dads.
He's definitely one of the dads. He's one of my 3 dads. Is it my 3 sons? You make a show called My 3 Dads. So,
they're 3 dads.
Yeah, they're not my dads, that's right.
That would be weird.
I think it's because I didn't have a dad. Now I've given my kids 3 dads, going like, don't say I never gave you a dad. Gave you 3. You can have a choice. So that dad came, and then the next dad, he waited, and he came in the afternoon, and my husband was the dad that went through the day. He was the dad through the day dad. Because it's his house. Yeah, like I couldn't make him leave. And during that day, and the next dad brought his new girlfriend, and we got to meet her, which was really nice. And we all kind of, swam and had lunch, and it was actually really lovely. Like, it wasn't probably a normal Christmas in the sense of what you expect to do with your family, but I felt like we'd really come through a lot of stuff because that couldn't have happened, a while ago back in the past. I'd worked really hard to get those relationships so you can do that, because I reckon as the kids get older, if you've got a separated family, you've got to take things into consideration like, well, are we all going to attend this person's significant birthday on 18th or a 21st, or what if they get married? They're the things that if you don't actually find a way through, in the end it's actually hard on the kid.
Walk me through it. Let's start with the first father.
First father number 1, that was Rhett, and I met him when I was probably in my mid-20s, and I was never someone that I'd never thought about whether I was going to have children. I had no maternal kind of drive at all. I was a feminist. I had no dreams about marriage and white dresses or anything like that. There was none of that for me. And I don't know, Rhett was a real party boy, and I've always liked a bad boy. It was funny and charismatic.
How did you meet?
We met at a friend's house. I think I came to pick something up, and he was flirting with 2 other girls. And I remember thinking, oh, he's quite cute. And we became friends, and sort of we were in the friend zone with each other very early on, and had lots of, we kind of, that thing where we were friends, but we were in our 20s, so we would occasionally have a sexual relationship, but we saw other people at the same time. And it just intensified to the fact that I'm very terrible at contraception. It intensified to my poor contraception.
That'll do it.
Yeah, and then I got pregnant.
Were you together exclusively when you got pregnant?
Oh, we just sort of were, but we hadn't really talked about it. We're a little bit free hippie-ish. We're living in Byron Bay, mind you, so this is free hippie-ish. And I said, oh, I'm pregnant. And I thought, am I going to have a baby? And I said to him, what do you think? I'm thinking this is about the right time. I'm 27. And he goes, oh, yeah, I'm into it. And that was it. Like, that was my thought process. It's really weird when I think back. I was so immature. I was so anti-establishment. I didn't want to think within the kind of paradigms of anything else. So my thinking was a little bit outside of that. And so we went ahead with that. And that was how we started our relationship. And I changed a lot.
Were you working?
Yeah, I was working as a stand-up comic. Rhett wasn't working. He works now, but his big joke was he just partied all the time and he had fun. He did little projects and things on the side, but he'd lived a really, kind of fun life. And he's one of those people that had like a magic kind of thing about him that, he got away with doing things like and in life, things just happened for him. His brother was, Michael Hutchinson, so he very early on in his life, he'd been gifted fabulous parties to go to. But I don't think at that point it had occurred to him to work.
Well, it's like he had this amazing lifestyle by association.
Yeah, like it didn't seem like any point.
And what was that like for you, being part of that whole world?
Him not working wasn't easy, but being part of the world was kind of intriguing and interesting, in that it was so funny. We'd be on Centrelink and the next week like a limo would turn up and take us off somewhere when, Michael was in town, and we'd go to a fabulous party on a holiday for a week and then come back and go back on Centrelink. We're still on Centrelink the whole time. But that was the kind of irony, is that we were living a very simple life where we were really poor, but suddenly we'd be whisked away into fabulousness. It was sort of hard to get a gauge of what was normal. And Rhett's written about this in his book, is that Rhett had a very long-standing, heroin addiction, which he was really trying to get off when we first got together. But part of my thing was I sort of stupidly didn't think it was such a big deal.
How could you not?
I know,
think that was
it's
a
a
big
red
deal?
flag. Oh, it's just a little heroin addiction.
But like heroin, that's not like a party drug or smoking dope. That's...
Yeah.
How did you
it seems weird how I minimised it.
Yeah.
Because when I met him, he'd just come out of a rehab facility where he was clean, and then he'd started using. And I think it's because I didn't understand the complexities of addiction, and because he talked about wanting to stop, I thought that meant that he was going to. And I didn't realise a lot of times addicts, and my own dad, who died when I was 6, he was a full-on alcoholic and he died in a car accident. So in a sense, it's almost like the pathway was already there.
It was familiar to you.
I know, it was familiar. Like, it's almost I had to walk this out. My mother never left her addict partner because he died. And in a sense, it was almost like part of my story I had to dance out, that I would do exactly the same thing with full, like I knew what I was doing at the time. I sort of look back at that and think, I'm a smart woman, I'm educated, I have insight. Well, clearly not that much. And you still do stuff, but I was really in love with him. Like, we were really in love. We had a great time. And of course, I was full of hope. I wanted to rescue him. I thought, his family adored me, and why shouldn't they? I mean, I'm pretty adorable, but no, it's not that. It's because they thought I was going to rescue him as well. They're like, I was like their favourite girlfriend he'd ever had. I had their support a lot in that relationship, because they knew how challenging it could be to be in a relationship with someone with an addiction.
So what was it like living with him?
I didn't understand the psychology of addiction very well until I lived in that situation, and then I really did, and it was hard. Like, I think I spent nearly every day crying, because I would just beg. I was just like going, please, please. And I kind of, looking back now, I sort of feel sorry for that girl that did that. I'd still go on stage and do comedy, and I managed to
What would it be like when he was on heroin?
Oh, just like most people, they just sort of nod off and people get quite affectionate and nice, which is kind of weird. Like, you don't want them to be nice. And when they're hanging out, when they're straight, they're kind of more agitated, annoyed.
So that was the harder part to deal with.
That's actually harder. So when they actually are kind of open, relaxed and medicated, then I'm angry. So we'd had a lot of turmoil in that time too, because during that time his brother had died, and that wasn't a normal circumstance. It was massive. and it was public and there was a lot of grief and everything became kind of crazy. And that's about the time I just felt like I couldn't keep up. I was scared because there was a really great sense of danger in how I was living and where I was living with my child.
I wanted to ask about Rhett's identity as Michael's brother. You know, it can't be easy being a sibling of one of the most famous rock and roll stars in the world. And he didn't live in Australia. So as you say, it's not like that was your life all the time. He'd come in and out. So how does any sibling in that situation, and how did you manage being part of that and then not being part of that?
I think it's definitely hard. I really feel for anyone who's the brother or sister of a really famous person, because it becomes a part of your identity in a sense, because that's how people reference you. Oh, that's such and such's brother. That's such and such's sister.
It must feel diminishing.
Yeah, and then after a while you start saying, I'm such and such's brother. It becomes the way you do that. And I think it's really hard. And, you know, and there is a natural sibling rivalry and competitiveness and love and loyalty and protection and all those kind of things. But it goes out of kilter when you have someone that is kind of so in like his orbit was so, you know, it was massive. Like he was like a son that just, you know, in a sense, like in that, you know, incredibly charismatic and, you know, fantastic person, and was amazing to be around. You know, that was a whole other story. But I think it's a real challenge, and I don't know how anyone would negotiate that. I think you could do a whole thesis on the emotional complexities of being a sibling in that situation, because the only visibility is because of your sibling, and in a sense there's a big shadow, you know, in your family.
There's the expectation that if you've got a famous relative, you just ask for money and you just get given whatever you want.
I guess that is the expectation, and perhaps that had happened, but I think in our circumstance that would have been the worst thing to do, because because Michael knew what Rhett would do with money. And I don't think it would have been the solution at any stage. So, and we had really nice times. We had really happy times, you know, and we were it was edgy, like for anyone. I think my mother was just horrified the whole time about the way I was living. But
you looked so glamorous and so rock and roll, though. I remember photos of you. I mean, you still do, but I remember photos and paparazzi photos of you and Rhett from that time. You know, you're tall and blonde and he looks like Jim Morrison, and, you know, you're hanging out with Michael and Kylie, or Michael and Helena, or Michael and Paula, whoever it was. It all looked very decadent, and in some ways I guess it was. But also I met Michael only a couple of times when he was with Helena, and he was like the sun. Like there was something about him, like you would think someone that famous would be an asshole, but he loved women, and he was just incredibly charismatic.
Yeah, really charismatic. He had a really great way, I've noticed, in a room of talking to
gentle.
people. Really gentle and soft. And he never tried to push himself onto people with a big, loud personality. He had this really great.
He wasn't an
thing.
alpha.
No, he's not an alpha male at all. I thought he would be before I met him, and then I was really kind of a little bit disarmed at how gentle and genuine that he was, and this capacity to just look at people when he was talking to them. And he didn't do that thing that a lot of people do at those very fabulous parties where he looks over your head to see if there's someone better. Like he would just look. I remember him meeting my mum, and there was a whole lot of people there, but Mum goes, wow, he just looked at me the whole time and asked questions. And it was weird because he asked questions. He actually initiated and wanted to find things out. And that was a really lovely aspect. I think that's a nice thing of a person's personality is to know that. I didn't really, like Helena I only met after, you know, at Michael's funeral and afterwards at some other events. And I sort of only really came on just as they'd split up. I'd got together with Rhett and he was seeing Paula. So I was only really part of, you know, sort of that period.
When Michael died, you obviously felt personally this is someone you loved and that you knew very well. This was your brother-in-law. But then it was also a massive industry and a massive international circus of a story. How do you process or synthesize those two things?
I kind of struggled to do it because it was just weird for grief to be so much in the public eye and to have paparazzi at your hotel window and chasing you in the streets. And it was scary, and surreal. It was hard to experience the intimacy of death in that circumstance, and I think that probably happened for everyone in that it makes it feel like a performance, and I think that was really hard, and I think that really impacted on everybody's ability to experience grief after that, because it was, I mean, how do you even do that? Nobody was really quite knew how to orchestrate a funeral. It was the year of the giant funerals for some reason. I mean, I think Harry and Miller turned up at one of our private family meetings, and I was going, oh, this is odd. What's Harry and Miller doing here?
Because then everyone had a story to sell.
Everyone had a story to sell, or he was going to control the funeral or something. I don't know. I sort of was the breastfeeding mother on the periphery, kind of quietly observing, but not actually saying anything, but then going back to the room and just going, what the hell just happened? I'm not sure. And then we'd kind of proceed from there. It was so hard. I didn't have any skills to navigate with what I was, the world I was in. And it wasn't so much I'm quite comfortable hanging, it's quite funny in some of those situations where you're meeting people and you're going, oh, that's funny, isn't that something and such? But it's the emotional complexity that's the hardest, of trying to stay real and grounded in a situation where at times you feel like you're in an episode of Bold and the Beautiful or something like it would just kind of become unreal. And that was impacting. This is hard enough to have a relationship as it is. I'm living with someone who has a very full-on addiction issues, trying to get clean, and as soon as it looks like he's getting clean, something will happen and this will happen, and I'll go, what's happening now? And then I've got a child. I'm trying to get by. We were living on nothing. That's why I was so rock and roll, though, because I was walking. I didn't have a car. I was skinny as rock and roll. You look really rock and roll when you're living on the poverty line. I had to carry my groceries back about 5 kilometres a day. Such hardship, but that's not really hardship. But I mean, that's part of it. Part of it was, I was like some sort of third world mother. I had the kid on one hand, I had nappies up here. Often I'd have to go to, we'd run out of money, and you'd have to go, to St. Vincent's and, get nappies or, groceries.
Was Rat contributing anything?
Yeah, he definitely did. He definitely contributed, but when you've got an addiction, it eats a lot into what you do. But he wasn't someone who didn't contribute.
But was he a responsible father? Like, could you trust him?
He loved his kids. It's always hard to – responsible is like – I think when you're an addict, it takes away sometimes your capacity to make –
good
choices that you would otherwise make. And I don't think I would really not like to say, at the end I would never say someone was a good or bad parent because of it. And I think they would have challenges, to be the kind of parent they want to be because of their addiction. At the time I didn't. I got angry, but now I'm much nicer.
What made you decide to call time on that marriage?
Because I was so unhappy. And I had a feeling our fabric of our relationship had started to fall and pull apart, and I just went, this is the time, to do it. So I did. I remember saying, telling him, that's it, don't come back. And a week later that's when I found out I was 6 weeks pregnant with Sophia, my next daughter. So then I went, great, I finally managed to get out of the relationship. I've got a 2.5-year-old. Now I'm 6 weeks pregnant. Going to be a single mum. I've got nothing. Like, I had nothing. Dirt poor.
Did you think about ending that pregnancy?
No, I didn't, interestingly. Even though I'd had 3 terminations before I had my first daughter, it wasn't that I'm against having terminations. It's that I'd been a non-maternal woman that had a child, and then I really loved kids. It was a bit of a surprise. I didn't realise how much I loved kids. So I decided to just do it. My thinking process is a bit like this. So I go, can't be that hard, I guess.
No money, no
partner. I know. I thought, well, if I've had one kid and I've dealt with a difficult relationship with when there's been addiction issues, then maybe, that will be okay. And so I kind of just went, look, I'll proceed. But the one thing I did do is that's when I actually realised I had issues that I had to deal with, and I went and found a therapist.
So did you make very different choices for your next partner?
Yeah, I think I did. It's really funny when I met my next partner, Russ, it was a bit sooner than I'd wanted to meet someone. I wasn't ready. I think it had been, 18 months, probably, a whole year and a half on my own.
And then you got married again.
Well, eventually not straight away, but we did. It was really
How was
nice.
he different?
He was just and it was hard, having to take on a partner that, or for him, I really respect the fact that taking on someone with 2 young children is pretty big, because when you walk into their life, you're going to become a father figure as well. So that's pretty big too. He was really, he was very much, he had a job. That was a good start. And he was he was a very fierce and loving person and character. He's really capable and creative and funny, and had all those kind of qualities that I really, really loved. But he was really grounded and earthy. I remember saying once to him, very early, because I was still quite damaged, going, if you've got any addiction issues, you really need to tell me, because I can't go through, I will not go through this again. And there's all this lingo too, you should know, for drugs. There's special ways of talking and asking for if you want to score drugs. And one of them, if you want to, at the time, I don't know what the current lingo is, but it used to be if you wanted to score heroin, you'd say, can I get on? And I'd heard that said. And I'm,
for years, by
yeah. So I'm in my relationship with my new partner, and we'd had this conversation, and he's moved in, quite a way down the track. And you know how you do that thing when you're not quite trusting? And I found myself snooping around and eavesdropping on conversations, because I didn't quite trust him yet. And I heard him on the phone one morning going, I'm just ringing up to see if I could get on. And I went, I kind of almost pushed through going, you told me, and I got hands on my hips, that you weren't, a heroin user. And he puts the phone down. He goes, I'm on the phone to the golf club. And he was seeing if he could get on the green today.
Very different.
Very different.
Yeah, but those scars run deep.
Yeah, they do. And you have to try to not take them into another relationship. So we really fell in love. It was a really passionate relationship. And it was big for him because he had to decide to take on 2 kids. And at first he was like, I don't know if I can do this. And it's quite amazing like that. He went, I can't do this. It's too hard. And then one night he just went, because we had sort of a bit of a long distance thing for a while when he was living in Sydney. And one day he just went, no, I can do it. And just like that, like one sentence. And then it was amazing.
And then, you guys had kids?
I had another son, which is Charlie. And that happened we'd talked about, say, I'd love to have another child. I didn't mean next week. But that's, as soon as I say those magic words, for me, I'm like, even sitting here with you, if I said it, I'd probably be pregnant.
Probably.
Yeah.
So you had 3 under how old?
3 under 6 by that stage, So Charlie, I was pregnant pretty quickly. We moved to Sydney and then eventually moved back home. I found Sydney kind of hard to live in after having, because I am a bit of a hippie at heart and I really like the free kind of lifestyle, I guess. As much as I love Sydney, kind of fitting into the kind of swing of being a mum with, I wasn't quite used to this whole thing that you can't just, I'm a public breastfeeder. I can not even public breastfeeder. I can push a trolley and have a boob out in the supermarket breastfeeding and shop, right? And I would do that on the North Shore. People were falling over, stopping, and I was like, what's going on? My friends go, can you see everyone? Went, what? She goes, everyone is stopping and coming back to look at you. And I went, what is wrong with them? It felt normal. And I'd be asked to go to those horrible feeding rooms. And I'm like, I'm not going in there. And I found that really weird. I wasn't used to that kind of impulse. And I also fed all my kids for 3 years each. So that was also made me a little bit of an aberration.
That means you were feeding multiple kids at the same time sometimes?
No, just a crossover. Sophia only got 18 months to 2 years, unfortunately. She missed out. Charlie got 3 years, and Zoe got 3 years, and Ivy got 3 years, and Rachel sadly got none because
she wasn't your biological child.
But yeah, so that was, I'm quite the attachment parent. Sort of I find.
Are you?
Yeah, totally. They all slept in bed with me, and
did you wear them all?
Yeah, they were all strapped to me all the time. I often performed on stage with them. Like, I think Charlie, I didn't put him down for a year. Like, I just did everything. I didn't stop working. I just did it with a child. I painted, I performed, I wrote. I'd sit at a computer. I'd put them in a sling beside me. It was just constant. It was which I really loved. I never was prepared for how close and how much I loved my kids. And Russ was an amazing dad, like really stepped up with the kids. It was really lovely, to have. But, having 3 kids under that age, it's a challenge, to try and keep your, we didn't have like a honeymoon period in our relationship.
Well, you had no time on your own, did you?
We had no time on our own. I had an 8-month-old baby, that absolutely, and it was so cute. I mean, she loved him, and it was harder for Zoe because she was 3.5, 4 when he came along. So for her, it was a little bit more complex trying to take on like a new dad. And I knew she used to look at him a bit.
How many years were they with Russ before you guys split?
8. They were together about 8 years.
And so then your third partner, the third dad, had a child of his own.
Yes, he did. And we had met at the parent pickup years ago, and not at the school, because his daughter and my eldest daughter had been friends at primary school. And so we'd had this nice chatty relationship from years before, and I just knew him from dropping. I always thought he was kind of cute. I did have this weird thing though once where, have those little weird deja vu things? It wasn't even deja vu because it hadn't happened yet. Is there a deja forward?
Deja preview.
I know,
yeah.
That's it, a deja preview. I was walking, felt bad because I was walking into down to the beach, and it's one of those walkways. It's quite wide. And I was walking up with my family and Russ, and coming down the other way was John and his current girlfriend. And as he walked past, I smiled and said hi, and I got that deja vu feeling, which was really weird. And it was kind of like that feeling you have when something's happened before but it hadn't. And I remember years later when I was with my husband, who's John now, going, that feeling I had then, it was so weird, but it was like, I said, I'm not trying to be too kind of oogie boogie because I'm not into that, but I went, it was sort of like I said I felt there was something, perhaps a story that might play out. Like I didn't know.
Did he?
No.
He doesn't even remember.
Doesn't even remember it. No idea whatsoever. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about.
So the dynamics of the having a blended family like you do, and the kids with their different relationships. So your 2 eldest had their biological dad who was Rhett, but they probably didn't remember him that much. But then Russ was the dad they grew up with for their formative years of their childhood. And then John came along. How did all that play out, the different combinations?
It's really complex. So it was, I do remember my daughter sitting there with her friend one day. She was only up to 2 dads then, my middle daughter, and she was sitting there, and her friend had 2 mums. And so the little friend, Sophia, turns to the little friend and she goes, I've got 2 dads. They're about 3, and the little girl turned to Sophia and goes, oh, I've got a donor dad. It was so cute. And I went, they kind of get it.
It's very modern.
It's very modern, but... Look, I've
got a donor dad. That's so cute.
It's adorable. And I think, I'm not saying it is really complex, but it's funny. They're all very loved by their dads, and it's not ideal. Like, you wouldn't ideally put kids in a situation to make it this complex and confusing. Fortunately, there hasn't been court cases or
acrimony.
Terrible acrimony. There's been arguments and there's been resentments and there's been times where you've probably said things you shouldn't have said, but it hasn't escalated into anything else. And I think we've saved our relationships across or for all those kids because of it. My elder daughter's found it the most complex to navigate because, she always had her loyalty to her first dad, but then he was kind of off the scene and he wasn't able to be present. So she then felt that I'm not the same. I'm not, the next dad that, even though, it was a loving relationship, she held herself a little bit apart. And it's always, she was a bit older. And then by the time John came along, she was, 11 or 12. And so she's not taken on another dad. at that time. And so she hit adolescence with some pretty confusing issues around her parents and around her mother's availability. I think she would have just liked me to be on my own, really.
Well, no one wants to share their mum.
I know, and I think she was just hoping. I think at the time she was just hoping that if I was going to break up the relationship, I'd just be on my own, And I think, I think that was really hard for her, and she was going through. Not long after that, it wasn't. I don't think it's a coincidence that 3 years later she develops an eating disorder at 13 and 14, and then she becomes a self-harmer, and then she developed, anxiety and pretty significant mental health issues that impacted. And I think a lot of it came, through that. And as a mum, I do take a lot of responsibility for my decision-making and the way I've lived my life for impacting on my kid. As much as I try to minimise harm to her as possible, she was particularly affected by stuff that had happened. But she's very articulate and she's come a long way. Like, she's quite an amazing young woman. Like, she's great and she's really open and really, really incredible. I thought I could protect her from all of that by my not, the fact I wasn't engaging in antagonism and I wasn't setting up, negative stuff.
You were
around
having
her
a
dad.
good
I was
divorce.
trying really to do that.
Yeah.
But, I couldn't completely protect her for that. She still felt abandoned and unloved and at times rejected. That meant that came down the track. And it's, it's really hard sometimes, as a parent and a mum. You don't really see it at the time because things don't happen until much later, and then you look back and it's not like blaming yourself, but I certainly do take responsibility for choices that I've made, and I've talked to her about that.
Is it possible to have a good divorce, do you think?
Yeah, I do. I do think it is. I don't think it's possible to have one without deep feelings and without some anger and without some resentment and blame. But it is possible not to get stuck there. I really do believe that. I'm always shocked. I've often heard people talk about their relationship breakup, and I thought, God, it must have just happened last year, and it's like 12 years ago. And you go, how can you even remember these stories? When people remember blow-by-blow accounts of then he said that and then that happened, and I'm like, I wouldn't even remember. I feel kind of good about that, is that my capacity to let go and move on and not be resentful is part of what helped have a good divorce. And honestly, and I think the other people that I've been involved with have really risen to the occasion as well. Like, everybody in our family wants to be the best they can for the kids. They haven't always been able to do that, but the kids have taken, they're loved, they've had priority. They've probably had a little bit too many dads, but...
How old are they now?
Ivy is my youngest and she's nearly 10. And then I have my son who just turned 18 the other day. And then I have my middle daughter, Sophia, who was the girl I had when I left Rhett, and she's now 20. Rachel, my stepdaughter's just turned 23, and Zoe is 23, turning 24 in August. So, and they're really fun. Like, we have so much fun together. The nice thing about our family, sometimes in a blended family, the kids don't actually all like each other. But Ivy came along, who's connected to everyone. Like, she's our one little family member, which I think was I named her after my grandmother, but then I realised that Ivy is it's a vine. And I went, she's a genetic vine that is actually the only one genetically connected to everybody. And she really, as a small baby, when Zoe was going through a lot of hard stuff and anger as an adolescent, the one thing that kept her anchored was this little baby. So Ivy was incredibly important to keeping this family together. And now everyone, we have a great deal of love for each other. We have so much fun together. Like, the kids, we've just had a weekend of all being together, and it's really nice. We love having holidays together. Everyone's got very different, distinct personalities, but they're all really funny. These are funny. We laugh a lot, pretty outrageous. We're not your normal family. We're like the Addams family, but without the costumes.
And living in Byron.
Exactly. Well, Mullumbimby, but I say Byron, but yeah.
Mandy, thank you so much. You've lived a big life.
I've got more to go.
Yeah.
Got about 3 more husbands to get through.
How did you decide to stop having children? Was it just nature decided for you?
I haven't stopped yet, but I don't think I'll be having any. I think I've only got.
How old are you now?
I'm 51, but I'm still going. I'm not having children, but I mean, I'm not in menopause yet.
Really? Are you not even peri?
No, I don't think I'm peri. I haven't had my hormones tested, but I haven't had any symptoms. And
So you could effectively still get pregnant now, technically.
yeah, I'll be like one of those biblical women. Like, I think it's time to stop. I imagine I've just got like 1 egg left. I always imagine it looks like, that egg in the
What a
carton.
sad little egg.
You know that's egg, and you have 1 egg in the carton, and it's like a free range. It's got a feather on it.
Yeah. A bit of a crack.
There's a crack in
Doesn't
it.
smell too great.
Yeah, and because of a crack on it, every time you go to get it out of the carton, it won't come out.
No, it's stuck.
And then you go, I should throw it out, but someone might need it, so I'll put it back in the fridge. You keep putting it back in. That's what I think I've got left now, that egg. So I think I've done my bit. Well, my youngest daughter keeps going, have another baby, Mum, and I'm not going to. She goes, why don't you adopt one or foster one? But I went,
You'll be grandmother soon.
I think that's exactly what I think. I think that's what will happen.
Nature's getting our bodies ready to become grandmothers.
Yeah, exactly. So, I feel
Just
very
don't try to
fortunate.
breastfeed your
I won't.
grandchild.
I miss breastfeeding. I loved it.
Yeah, I
wouldn't
loved it
breastfeed
too.
my grandchild. That's just
that's
just
just
a level
icky.
of creepy I'm not prepared to actually
Even you.
indulge in. Not even me. Be funny in public though. Imagine how freaky that would be. Just to pretend. I would do it just to pretend. I love seeing people's faces when they think something like that.
Thanks for listening to No Filter. If you want to hear more from Mandy, I have good news. She is hosting, as I said, a new podcast of ours called The Split. We wanted to make an adult's guide to separation and divorce. It's one of the toughest times you can go through, and we wanted to be there to support you through. And I think, as you heard in this episode, Mandy is such a non-judgmental and reassuring, safe pair of hands. She's a voice of wisdom, and in the podcast she interviews all kinds of experts. She talks to lots of women who've been through all kinds of different types of separations and divorces, and there's just so much information about the emotional side, the financial side, the logistical side. There's so many logistics. You can subscribe to The Split now wherever you get your podcasts, and tell a friend if you think of someone that you know that might need to hear it. This podcast was produced by Eliza Ratliff